Hello everybody and welcome back to the next episode of Team Comp Tuesday. This might be Team Comp Wednesday because there may have been some road work going on here almost all day, so I'm recording this a lot later than I normally do. Normally I have this done the day before, but due to some work on the streets this might be delayed, but probably not by more than a couple hours, so I hope that's fine. But up today we have our first Dendro comp. Sumeru came out about a week and a half ago, so we have our first Dendro comp here today. Originally, I was thinking about maybe doing a Bloom comp, but I've always loved Keqing. Keqing was my first character I ever put a lot of investment, a lot of time into, so an Aggravate Keqing team, it definitely is here this week. Just, again, to remind you, this series is meant to show off some of the interesting and fun teams you can play, some of them be meta, some of them be not. Well, I don't necessarily think this is the most powerful team in the world. This is definitely relatively competitive, and more importantly than not, this is just a good showcase of the shell of this team and what directions I think this team could go in the future going forward. Alright, so just to switch it up here in the beginning here, I'm actually going to quickly talk about all the different configurations for this team. So right now I am playing this team. This team is an Aggravate based team, which is the reaction of Dendro on Electro. It's a reaction that doesn't really require too much Dendro application, but essentially what it does is it adds some extra base damage to Electro hits. So the more Electro hits you do, the more you react, the more value you get out of the reaction. The reaction scales with EM character level and then also damage bonuses. And it does do Electro damage, so it scales with Electro damage bonus, or it should as well. So the comp that I am specifically playing here is Keqing, Fischl, Traveler, and Kazuo, but there are variations of this comp, and this is kind of more to meant be like a shell video to tell you what characters can be played like in this kind of setup. But the basic version of this comp is you just want some kind of a Nemo shred to do more Electro damage, as much Electro application as humanly possible that also does good damage themselves, and a character that can apply Dendro. Now, the Dendro application does not need to be very quick, and it does not need to be super, not consistent, but it doesn't have to be up all the time. Like, realistically, you only need Dendro to be applied every, 5-10 seconds, maybe, something like that. But, obviously, if the character can produce more, or if there's characters that bear synergy with more, that's always a good plan. At the point of this coming out, we don't have access to units like Sino, who I assume will be played in this exact style of team comp, as well as only having access to 3 Dendro units, Traveler, Tainari, Kali. So that could change as time goes on, so be aware if you're watching this at a much later date, but you should still get the basic idea from this video and be able to take that and extrapolate it further into whatever kind of new units that come out. Alrighty here, so we are going to start by going over the characters in the team. We're going to start with Keqing. Just a side note, Keqing is replaceable with Beidou in this comp, would work completely fine here, as well as possibly Sino. We don't know much about him, but assuming he is an Electro carry of some sort, he would 100% work in this kind of team comp. But I like Keqing. A lot of people like Keqing, so I figured I'd use Keqing as the driver for this team. A side note, Aggravate, I mentioned earlier, does scale off level, so ideally you want a level 90. Any characters that'll be triggering Aggravate. Also, it scales off EM, so stuff like an EM Sands with really good substats can be better than attack Sands, depending on the character. Generally, and the thing that makes the difference is whether an EM attacker better is the scaling on their skill and burst and stuff like that. If they have higher numbers here, generally better to stick with attack. But either or is fine, although I generally would just recommend attack since attack works on every character. But anyway, into Keqing, I am rocking a black sword for that juicy normal charge attack bonus. Also some healing, as the variant the main the damage variant of the highest damage variant of this team does not have a healer, which is something we'll talk about later when we get into when I talk about future units that could make this team better. So I'm rocking a black sword, in part because of the healing, in part crit rate, good substats. Other options, any good Keqing sword works here. Possibly even something like Iron Sting could actually have value here, since it does have that EM passive, and actually has a relatively good passive for this kind of stuff. So something to look out for. Most like decent Keqing weapons, this would be fine as well, since you'll almost always have stuff affected by Electro. So a high refined Lion's Roar, any of the 5-stars that give crit damage, anything like that. Artifact set, I have her on 4 Thunder Soother. Ideally, if you have a good 4 set, this is what you want. You want the Thundering Fury set, due to it increasing the damage of Hyper Bloom, as well as giving you E cooldown so that you can do more aggravates with your Keqing. But I don't have my Thunder Soother has much better substats, so I have Thunder Soother on. Perfectly fine. 2-piece Electro, 2-piece attack. Any attack combinations, possibly even 2-piece Wanderers could be fine here, but I haven't really tested that. But Thundering Fury best in slot if you want to go for. Relatively standard setup. Crit on your circlet, electro damage on your goblet, and then either attack or EM here, depending on what you have better substats for. Talents, everything is useful for Keqing, as everything has separate electro application, which means it can trigger Aggravate by itself. So normal attack good, skill good, burst good, level them all up, they all good. Alright, next up is Fischl. She is arguably the only character in this entire setup that has no replacement, and I highly doubt will ever be replaced in this kind of Aggravate team comp setup, because she is completely off field, applies so much Electro to be able to trigger more aggravates, more damage. It's just super powerful. She is arguably, even like because of Dendro, she has now gotten very close to surpassing some of the broken like 5-star DPSs in power level. Like, I would make an argument now that Fischl could be as good, if not better, than units like Ganyu and Ayaka. She's that good now. She was insane before, now she's even more insane. Weapons, anything with crit rate damage, fine. Also, anything with EM, fine, as Aggravate does scale off EM, so giving her more damage. Stringless, great if you have it. Also, the Windbloom Ode, completely fine if you have it. Otherwise, crit stat stick is the way to go. For artifacts, I have her on Thundering Fury Gladiators. You can have her on any attack combination, electro damage, possibly even Wanderers with good substats. Millilith is also an option if you want a team buffer, or possibly even Noblesse. Not super good Noblesse holder, but definitely a better Millilith holder. But yeah, for stats, just basic for her: crit rate or crit damage, electro damage. And for Goblet, you can either opt for EM or attack, depending whichever one has better substats. Go for that one. For talents, Oz is what is insane here. Oz does a lot of off-field damage, and also helps apply even her A4, which her A4 is probably the most broken essential passive in the game in terms of what it actually does. It just does an extra electro hit every time you trigger an electro reaction, and this gets crazy with how much this hits and how much like this can trigger and this can aggravate, so this can get the bonus damage and everything. So this is insane. You can also level up her burst if you want to. Also, highly recommend, again, 90 of 90 for units that are going to be triggering Aggravate. Alright, next up here we have Dendro Traveler, which is our current Dendro applicator of choice. Possibly, we're going to talk about this at the end after rotations, about kind of... Actually, we'll probably talk about this after we talk about Kazuha, actually. let's hold on to this thought. Know that Dendro Traveler is the applicator for now, but we may talk about how that can change in the future. Weapons, any ER weapon is fine here. The new craftable sword would be pretty good, although it has a low ER substat, and the Dendro Traveler needs a lot of ER, so personally, I like Fav Sword here. You could also go Sack Sword, perfectly fine here. New craftable, Festering Desire even, fine. Artifact set. New Dendro set is the way to go, just to give them a little bit extra bonus damage. For substats, main things you're looking for, EM, crit rate, crit dam is fine. For other teams, you may want Elemental Mastery, but for this team especially, something like Energy Recharge Sands is great, Dendro Damage Goblet, and then I don't have a crit rate piece, but I would have a crit rate piece here ideally, or a crit damage piece. Probably a crit rate piece if you end up using a Festering Desire. Not really any other artifacts I would recommend, really. Maybe a Noblesse set could be fine here as well, but either Noblesse or 4-piece Dendro is the way to go. Talents, mainly caring about your E and your ultimate. Just a little tip on how the Traveler's ultimate works. If you hit it with another element, it actually causes it to do different things. In this team, we only have Electro, so that'll just make it do a little bit more damage. And normally, I wouldn't talk about constellations, but considering everybody gets Traveler constellations, C1 and C2, both are very nice if you can get them, especially this C2 here, just giving her more time on field to do damage. It actually spreads out her Dendro application a little bit, so that you can get more uptime. Also, the C6 here, pretty good, as it gives, if you hit her ultimate with Electro, will give your team 12% Electro damage. Or the character that hits it will get 12% Electro damage bonus, which is totally nice. Also, Traveler also gives a stacking EM buff, which buffs the actual reaction itself. So, very solid. It's nice to actually have a Traveler that is pretty good, finally. And she fits very well into this kind of team setup, or they fit really well into this kind of team setup. Alright, and the last unit we're going to talk about here is a Nemo Flex slot. Yes, I said a Nemo Flex slot, because technically there are three different options, two or three different options here. But Kazuha is the one I like to use just because I like Kazuha. He's great. Weapons, Fav Sword or Iron Sting. Generally, you want to be able to ult on cooldown, so having some ER would be nice. I just don't have another Fav Sword, and Fav Sword's on Traveler right now. So that's why I have Iron Sting, just for the more EM for more bonus Electro damage. Set VV, as always, EM. You can go ER here, actually. If you're not getting enough energy back, which having double Electro on a team does help with energy. Fischl, also pretty good generic battery. Favonius Weapon on the Traveler helping with energy as well. You might not need it, but if you don't have a ton of ER substats, there's a chance you may want to consider an ER Sands here to be able to ult on every rotation. For skills, you basically have to level everything equally if you want him to actually do damage. You don't technically have to because, you're using him mainly for swirl and for his damage bonus. But he does do significant personal damage, so I would, level up his skills. But you do have to level all of them because his E here actually uses the charge attack or the plunge attack multiplier from his auto attack. So you do have to level everything. That's something that not a lot that some people mess up. Alright, in this last little section here, I'm actually going to briefly go over units you can run instead of Kazuha, because there actually are a couple of units that have some other value than him that you may want to consider if you have, or even if you don't have Kazuha. Sucrose works really well in this comp, especially because Aggravate scales off EM. This means Sucrose's EM sharing from her Ascension passives and stuff is actually very good. Weapon here, I actually recommend Sack Frags here if you have it, just to give her more ease, more grouping, more energy, that kind of stuff. Artifacts, same thing as Kazuha, VV, EM. Talents, you can level her skill and burst. Now, definitely at C0, Kazuha can be a little bit better than her. But one thing to note about Sucrose is This talent, her C6, which is normally not very easy to use because you're using the only element in your team that can be swirled is Electro. It means you will get 20% Electro damage bonus on top of the EM share. Basically, Sucrose ends up being more damage for your Electro characters, but Sucrose does less damage than Kazuha. They are very interchangeable. Run whichever one you like, whichever one you prefer. Me personally, I like Kazuha more, so I run Kazuha. Again, similar to the Aggravate reaction, Swirl triggers, or Swirl cares about the character's level, so you should max level every character that triggers Swirl. Alright, and last up is one of my favorite characters. This is Jean, and I use her as a flex slot mainly for open world content where you don't have to push as hard for damage checks. Because while she doesn't give your team as much of a bonus as the other two does, she does give healing as well as VV and has okay personal DPS. So, you know, still pretty good. Could be better. Weapons, I like this this Inazuma craftable. This just gives you energy basically every time you ult. So more ults, more healing, great. Artifacts for VV, unlike Kazuha and Sucrose though, you want damage, so crit rate or crit damage on head, Anemo damage on goblet, and attack on sands. Talents, everything is good here. Actually, I guess just seal and burst, you don't actually need her normal attack. This is definitely not the meta way to run this comp, but I like having a healer, or especially just for running around the open world, or non-timed content, or in a situation where, you know, your other characters can do enough damage, the comfort of having a healer can be nice, especially because normally other meta teams that are played without a healer, or other strong teams that are played without a healer, have some kind of like damage reduction in him. You know, taser setups with Sucrose and Beto have a lot of damage reduction, so despite the fact they don't have a true healer, Sucrose has something insane like 70% damage reduction in that team or something, so she's tanky as all hell. But this team has no damage reduction whatsoever, so you may want to consider Jean as a healer. I don't have Sayu built. You could maybe try Sayu, but Jean, perfectly fine in this flex slot as the last option. Alright, so now we're going to get to the rough rotation part of this. The nice part about Aggravate teams is basically all you have to do is apply Dendro, apply Electro, and then just apply as much Electro as humanly possible. Swirl your Electro if you can, kind of thing. So let's get at it. Generally, I like to start with the old Oz, into the Swirl, into the Dendro application, and then we just hit him up with the old Electro skill. N1 Cs if you are using Keqing, generally her most damaging reaction, and you can just rotate back through your team as needed in order to get Dendro reapplied, get the quicken reaction back up, and just go back to N1 C'ing, run out of energy, an ultimate to get your energy back, and bam. I want to thank you for watching this video. This was the first Dendro team on Team Comp Tuesday. I think next week we might do, not exactly sure, but I'm thinking maybe another Xiangling team. I think maybe International, as I've been starting to play that a lot on my alt, and it's just a very powerful team and definitely a very good team. I don't know, we might do that, we might do another Dendro team. Wait to see about that. But I just wanted to briefly talk at the end here about this team. So a couple things that could change in the future, and definitely what I would look out for, is if we get a Dendro healer. A Dendro healer would make this team a lot more comfy without asking you to run Jean, so you could still run Kazuha or Sucrose for the massive damage bonus that they give. And since you don't need that much Dendro application for an Aggravate team, the unit doesn't even necessarily have to apply that much Dendro, as long as they apply Dendro every like 5 seconds or something like that, maybe even less often than that is needed. They should be pretty good, so definitely I would look out for a Dendro character in the future that could be played as a healer. Also, there's a relatively high chance that Sino will be played in this team, so if you're looking for him and you're thinking, oh, what team can I kind of build to prepare? Fischl, Dendro Traveler, Jean, Kazuha, Sucrose, something like that. Probably, I'd be willing to bet money that's what his better team is going to be. But thank you for coming out, and I hope you have a great day.